Hello, and welcome to the 2024 class of the National Press Foundation Widening the Pipeline Fellowship. This is the second year of a fellowship designed to support and nurture the expertise and the vision of early career journalists of color. Before we get into the launch of this session, I'd like to take this opportunity to thank our sponsors, the Evelyn Y. Davis Foundation and Lenovo. For the first session of this year's Widening the Pipeline Fellowship, we're going to talk about what it takes to be a leader at every stage of your career. So often as journalists, we're told, work hard and maybe 10, 20 years from now, you'll get to be an editor or you'll get to be a publisher or whatever. But the energy and the effort that is really required to make journalism and make the kind of content that the public needs requires leadership at every stage of the game. And so we are greatly honored today to launch our fellowship program by hearing from our two speakers. To my immediate left, it's Melissa Macaya.
Hi, everyone.
Melissa is the senior live news editor with CNN, and she's also the Region 3 director for NAHJ. Next to Melissa is Ana Graciela Méndez. She's an investigative journalist who's also the product manager for the Marshall Project, and she's also a member of the inaugural cohort of the Adelante Academy, which is a Latina leadership program sponsored by NAHJ. So we are excited to hear from them, and I'm going to turn it over now to Melissa to take it away.
Yeah, definitely. And I think there's a clicker. Yes. Oh. Well, first of all, congratulations. This is a huge achievement. How many of you are from the DC area? Okay. And how many of you came from very far to be here? Okay. Well, congratulations for being here. So our session today, we are hoping to keep it informal. We want it to be dynamic. And as the title of the session says, we're going to be focusing on being a leader at every stage of your career. And like Rachel very well said, so many times we hear throughout our careers that until you're in the executive level or until you're an editor, until you get to that point, and we also sometimes put that pressure on ourselves, right? We can't fulfill certain goals that we have or speak up. And our hope for today is to share practical insights to you all and tips that you can take with you from day one and apply in your newsrooms to be a leader wherever you are and wherever you're headed. And as Rachel said, it's more important than ever to have individuals of different backgrounds and journalists of color in those positions. And before we do jump in, how many of you are interested in a leadership role? Maybe it's management, editing, anyone? Okay, almost everyone. So we're hoping that today's session is helpful to you all. So Rachel briefly introduced us, but we'd like to talk a little bit more about our careers before we jump in. Anna, do you want to kick us off?
Thank you so
and
much.
I'll sit here. So
and yes, congratulations to you all. It's not an easy landscape, and the fact that you all are committing to this crazy industry and looking for the tools and community to be able to sharpen your skills to, make it along. That's excellent. So, yeah, you do see a little bit about me up there. I am the product manager at the Marshall Project right now. I started my career as an investigative journalist in my hometown of Panama City, Panama. I was very fortunate to get a start in investigations. It doesn't typically happen that way. But that really just put me in the middle of a firestorm in local journalism of Panama. It was a very difficult, challenging political time. So I had to grow up really fast, being followed from my house to work every day when I was 24 years old was like a very important lesson, and I think it very much informed the trajectory of my career. It informed the agency that I realized I had in my career and the agency that I wanted to have and how I wanted to sort of shape my work. I think that a very pivotal moment for me, too, was seeing the news landscape when Donald Trump became president. I think really understanding what local news meant in that context, and I see a lot of local news people here, so shout out to all you local news folks. It really just put a lot of stuff in perspective. So I'll touch on founding Nueva Nación a little bit later. That's a digital news outlet in Panama that I was able to start with a friend that continues to exist as I work here in the US. But yeah, that's a little bit about me. Sorry, that was very rambly, but
no, it's good. That's really impressive. I live here in DC. I'm a senior editor with CNN Digital and a team called the Live News Team, which Aditi's a part of. I see her in the back of the room. And what we do is a little crazy, but it's also a lot of fun. We basically get to cover the biggest stories of the day for our millions of readers around the world. I help run our politics live coverage. So tonight we have the New York special election. Every day is different, from the campaign to last week's Supreme Court oral arguments on Trump and beyond. So it's a very, very busy time. But my career really began on the TV side, and throughout today's session, we'll talk a little bit about how to prepare for what that evolution may look like for you all. So before I was at CNN, I was at the Washington Post, where I helped run our morning and then evening video breaking news team. And then before that, I was at CNN Español, which is CNN's Latin American network, helping do on-air and digital coverage for a Politico show, and covered the 2016 presidential election, which feels like it was 50 years ago from the field, and that was an incredible experience. And then before that, I was at NBC News, where I worked on the news gathering side of things. Both Anna and I are involved with NHJ, which Rachel touched upon at the beginning. I'm a Region 3 director, where I help lead our chapters, our professional chapters in our region in DC and Philly. And then I also teach in Georgetown University's journalism masters. And before we jump into our first topic, we wanted you all to think about who, or help identify, or have you identify a leader who has inspired or motivated you in the past. Now, I'll note that this does not have to necessarily be a leader you know. It may not be, hey, if Oprah motivates you and she is the leader that's on your mind, from a president, maybe it's a current supervisor, we want you to take a few moments to identify that leader. And then think about, what characteristics does that person have? Specific characteristics. Is it how they speak, how they motivate your team, how they lead? And then in what ways did they inspire you specifically and motivate you? So we're going to take a few moments for you all to jot down some ideas, and then we're going to reconvene and it up to share.
The leader that I was thinking of was my third high school journalism teacher. All three of them were really great, but the third one specifically, she was like relentlessly optimistic in the types of things that we could get done at the paper, and like the ways that we could challenge ourselves to produce better and better work. And she was like the first person to start entering us in for awards and that sort of stuff, and just really being very proactive on behalf of her students, and that really meant a lot to me.
I love that. Thank you for sharing. Anyone else want to share? A DT in the back? And then Olivia.
I identified like more than one
And that's fine.
person, but they were all women, 4 of them. The thing that really inspired me when I saw them as leaders was they were essentially what she said, what Lily said, they were movers and shakers. They were doing a lot of things that may not have been done before. They were unafraid to speak their minds. They themselves moved strategically in their careers. And when they looked at me or like people around them, they weren't just mentoring me, they were sponsoring me, and they were like including me in the right conversations, putting me in the right rooms, and that was really cool.
That's great. Thank you for sharing. I think we had Olivia here in the front, and then Brandon.
Hi, I'm Olivia. I'm a business reporter at the Courier-Journal. The leader that I picked, if you're familiar with Olympic sports, you might know this person. He was my coach at the University of Missouri. His name is Robert Weir. And the characteristics about him, outside of just his mounting accolades athletically that inspired me, was that the way he was able to compel and use his personal story and relate to us on one-on-one levels. So like for myself, I was a walk-on turned scholarship athlete, but a lot of our team, because Mizzou's throw-in program is one of the top in the country, a lot of them came in as scholarship athletes and they had the talent already. And so it was really the characteristics that stood out were how he was able to nurture every individual athlete where they were at, and then also be able to reward and lean into the athlete's strengths, because my strengths were vastly different than some of the kids coming in who already qualified for the Olympic trials when we were freshmen. So that individual relationship and that usage of his personal story to relate to us and build our strengths out and also grow our weaknesses was really inspiring.
That's powerful. Thank you for sharing. Then we have Brandon, and then we'll have time for one more if anyone wants to share.
Hello, I'm Brandon Tinsley. I'm the national politics reporter at Capital B. And the person I identified is my current and also former manager, Dalila Paul. And, you know, she sort of has like all the qualities, the characteristics that I think everyone was mentioning. But one thing that always comes to mind when I think about her is like she has like a deep well of just empathy and also perspective. And I think, you know, working in news, especially in politics, you know, we were both at CNN before. I think it can be very easy to sort of like lose sight of like the people who are creating, you know, these stories and the, you know, these stories and these products. And I remember one time, like, had some like personal stuff going on, like burst into tears on the phone. And she was like, you know, just take care of what you need to take care of. Like the work will get done. Don't worry about it. And I remember just feeling like it felt so rare to have like a boss say like, you need to take care of yourself before you can take care of anything else that's happening here. And it was just really nice.
That's wonderful. Anyone, last person who would like to share? Oh, we have a question. I think we have time for one more, but maybe at the end in our Q&A, I'd love to hear from you all too.
Oh, hi, y'all. My name, y'all hear me?
Yeah, we hear you.
I
Loud
don't
and
talk
clear.
to microphones off, so this is different. Hi, my name is Caroline Colvin. I write for Industry Dive. My pronouns are they, them. And the person that I identified was my current manager. She's one of the first editors I had that like edited in a way that empowered me. So I feel like, I mean, all reporters probably know the feeling of like opening up the Google Doc or like the CMS and being like, oh, you just like tore up my whole story. Even though you like put forth your best effort. So I think she really like strikes a good balance between like pushing me to be like the best reporter I can be, but also empowering me and like making me feel like, you know, I know what I'm doing, I'm capable, but also like because of that I can like push myself further. So yeah.
That's wonderful. Thank you all for sharing. I hope we have a little bit more time at the end to share. Well, one of the things we want to highlight in today's session is all of those qualities and characteristics you described you all can emulate today. You do not need to wait to be an executive, a news director, an editor. As a reporter, in whatever role that you have, you can be that for someone else. You can help reflect those characteristics. And I encourage you to take what you wrote down or maybe stuck with you in your mind with you beyond this fellowship, but think about how can you showcase that in your own way? And what does that look like for you?
Also, don't write in your CMS, please, I beg you.
Oh, yes. Because if it crashes,
Right.
definitely. It's a very good tip. It goes beyond leadership. So our first key point that we want to cover is leading beyond your title. And in journalism, especially and in every field, you know, titles are used obviously to showcase and are symbolic in your trajectory professionally. But many times people find identities in their titles, and that's important. But there's so much more that you can do in your role beyond the title. And we really want to share some practical things that you can do and think about in leading beyond your title wherever you are. And I'll kick us off with the first one. The first point is making the most of where you are in your career. This can mean many things for different people. I remember when before my first stint at CNN, I was a fellow, and I remember one of the things that we had to do was, you know, print scripts. Anyone had to do that before for on-air correspondence? Or it is a journey sometimes to do that. You know, there's a lot of personalities. You're juggling a lot of things at the same time. And I remember some of my colleagues just were very upset that they had to do this job, you know, meaning they wanted to write, they wanted to produce. Why were they doing this role at this moment? And I remember being struck by the fact that, you know what, I see where they're coming from, but regardless of where you are, what is your best that you can bring in that moment? What does that look like for you? In my mind, when I was doing scripts, I was like, you know what? I'm going to have a good attitude, and I'm going to be hopefully the best scripter, whatever it's called, person carrying those scripts to the next person that needed them. And that really kind of helped define me in whatever I was doing. Bring your best and make the most of what that looks like. If you're a writer, if you're a photographer, really try to flourish in whatever that place that you're in is. And our next point?
Our next point is have ownership of a project, area of work, or topic. And in thinking of this, I realized too that I just did a horrible job of introducing myself, so I apologize for that. So my journey, like I said, I started as a reporter, investigative reporter in Panama. I eventually made my way to local news, like I said, and I was working at the Philadelphia Inquirer within a product team, but in an editorial role. So I was special projects editor, working hand in hand with product innovation. Those two things feel so different and so distinct. But pretty much what allowed me to make that jump and sort of follow that journey is the fact that I can just ask questions all day long. It's one of the gifts I have. I might not be great at many things in life, but I can sit down and ask you your whole life story for hours on end, and I will not get tired. And it really is the thing that allows you to say, okay, I know this is what I'm good at. How do I transfer this skill to different places that are of interest for me? And this can really take so many different paths. If you are extremely passionate about climate change, for instance, and you can own that beat and you can shape it into what you want, you can really do whatever you want with it. You can work on a product team that focuses on building products around climate reporting, around climate storytelling, which is one of the most difficult things that you could possibly do, because having people care about something that feels so intractable and so difficult to engage with, I mean, that's a whole universe in itself. If what you want to do is just be out in the field reporting, you can do that. If what you want is to be an editor and shape what it looks like to tell this crucial story for the next generation, you can do that because you've honed in on this deep interest. So all of that is to say that this can be a very powerful thing for you and to shape the direction that you want to take your career.
And I'll also note that sometimes that passion may be by default, in the sense, because that is part of your background or your story. In my case, I was born and raised in Venezuela, in Latin America. And even though I cover politics night and day, I am very passionate about the region. And when I can, I'm many times the only person from Latin America in the room. And you might be the only, that doesn't mean you only need to cover those stories, but you might be the only person and only opportunity for another one of your colleagues to ever get to meet a person from the region, hear your perspective, hear your voice. And that doesn't mean pitching a story. I mean, hey, can we make sure that we're including this perspective? Hey, can we make sure that if we're covering this, Venezuela, we're not just covering the crisis, we're covering the good side of the stories as well. And that can mean many things. And you can bring that with you even outside of your job description. You can still channel some of those passions and ownership in your own way. The next one, of course, is don't be afraid to speak up and raise your hand. And a lot of you, in speaking about those leaders that inspired you, you mentioned that they helped empower you to do that. How many of you have been in a meeting and at the end they'll say, anyone have anything else to add? And you have something to add, but you're like, maybe I don't want to add it. Maybe I'm adding too much time. And then you don't speak up, and then you feel that regret. Anyone felt that? Raise your hand if you felt that. If you feel comfortable raising your hand. I felt that. I felt that a lot in the beginning of my career. I'd be in a meeting and, I wanted to say these things, but I said, no, I'll leave it for next time. And I realized I do not want to feel that regret ever again. Now, that doesn't mean you just blurt out whatever you're thinking. Sometimes those can be powerful moments. You want to come prepared, but you do not want to regret those moments you didn't speak out at, especially if it's something you're passionate about. And if you are in a room with, very influential people, it's easy sometimes to feel Like, do you belong there? You belong. You are there. You make sure you have a seat at the table. Your qualities and your skill sets helped guide you to that moment. A lot of times we put our barriers on ourselves, and you know, there's small things that you can do to speak up. It can maybe be, hey, if you're in a Zoom meeting, have your camera on. Make sure you're engaging. Make sure that if there's open moments for conversation, you're jumping in. If there's a big table and you're in a conference room and there's one seat over there and no one's sitting at the table, go sit at the table. Go get a seat at the table. That's very, very important. Anything you want to add on that?
Yeah, I would add that with that, you know, it's always worth taking a look at the privilege that you might hold. There, you might be the one person in the room who is uniquely positioned to speak or advocate for something or for someone. I know for a fact that just by default of the makeup of one of the teams that I was on before the Marshall Project, there was undue pressure being put on someone who was junior to me. And I was uniquely positioned to intervene and be a shield for that person. You know, that seems silly. It seems like something that doesn't really matter, but it's those moments that can really make or break how you build team spirit and how you build your relationships within a newsroom. It also, you mentioned this a little bit earlier, right? It's about saying, oh, well, we should be including this perspective, and maybe we can take this a step further. And if I'm the only person who can translate something so that this piece of information becomes more accessible to more people, let's engage that. Let's explore the possibility of me translating a survey for user research or translating a piece of information for vaccine access. It's those little moments where you can sort of check your privilege, what you can uniquely offer that can also make the difference.
Definitely. And this one we already touched upon earlier, but you know, exemplifying the characteristics you value in a leader. I hope that after a session today, maybe later tonight, or after the happy hour and you're reflecting, maybe you take a stroll down, it's a little cold for a stroll, but maybe you go to Lincoln Memorial. You're like, well, what are those characteristics that inspire me? And I don't want you to feel like it needs to be huge things. It can be something small as, you know what, when I'm in the office, I'm going to greet everyone in the office today. I'm going to take the time to meet who I work with. Maybe it's doing, you know, in-person coffees, or maybe it's one meeting a week. I'm going to speak up at one of those meetings. That's going to look different for all of you, but really try to hone in what that looks like. Maybe it's being empathetic. A lot of you talked about that. Maybe it's being empathetic to your colleagues in unique ways. The last one is something that I've learned, especially in a city like DC. It's a marathon, not a sprint. How many of you feel like you're running a sprint in work, in life? Okay, some maybe not. You know, early on in DC, just people that come here are so driven, and that's an amazing thing. You're surrounded by driven and passionate people, but it's easy to get lost in that, and you get competitive and you lose track of what your own journey is. And I remember early on, one of my former anchors, I was in his office and I was like, well, Juan Carlos, I want to do this, I want to do that. I had all these dreams. I was probably 21, I don't know, all these dreams and things I wanted to do. And I remember he got a pencil and put the pencil at the end of the desk and then said, Melissa, you are right here. This is your career. It's a journey. You're going to get to your destination. Don't be so focused on the destination that you're forgetting the journey that you need to enjoy, that's going to make you a better leader at the end. If you skip all those steps, you're going to be one of those leaders that I assure you all did not think about when you were thinking about those good leaders that you were thinking about. So just a reminder, in leading beyond your title, we sometimes can feel frustrated if we're not in the place that we are in our lives, but don't get discouraged. Keep focused on the destination that you're on, and remember that it is a marathon. Anything you want to add to that?
I mean, I couldn't have said it better myself. When I was at the Inquirer working as a special projects editor, I was offered the opportunity to become deputy editor at a different desk. And the hiring manager told me, look, you take this job, you're straight shot to the masthead. You will be leading a newsroom in 5 years. I was like, wow, thank you so much. This is such a wonderful opportunity. I am humbled. but it's just not where I want to be in this moment in life. It also takes a little bit of humility to understand exactly what work you want to be doing and whether or not you're positioned to be doing that. Like, am I right now really in a place where I want to be leading a newsroom? On paper, that sounds extraordinary. On paper, that sounds like exactly the thing I should be doing. All the money that it brings, the prestige, the access to conversations and information. But right now, I want to be close to the people. I want to be close to the work. I want to be getting my hands dirty in the stuff and the making of things right now. So it doesn't really align for me to be this news executive at that level at this stage in life. And I know that I can get there eventually. I can reroute and I will find my way there if that is what I want to do. But I'm a new mom. I have a 14-month-old baby. Like, this feels better to me. I want to be close to the people, to the work. And again, leading beyond my title, I can still find ways to lead where I am. So I just chose to pivot over, and here I am as a product manager, commercial project. So
thank you for sharing. So our next topic is support, finding support. And all of you, our hope is that after this fellowship, you are a support for each other, because that's such a big part of finding support. So one of the first things, if you're not already, find a group to join. There's so many groups that are journalists, focused, and even if it's not journalism focused, find a place that you have a support group, that people that can understand you, places that you can get trainings. I got involved with NHJ in high school. My dad found an ad in a newspaper for a scholarship. And back, they flew us to New York to get these scholarships. And I remember the first thing that struck me entering the room was like, okay, everyone here loves journalism and they share similar cultural backgrounds as me. It blew my mind. It was like meeting multiple me's, but in different ways. And it was so exciting. And that has been a support for me throughout my career, whether it's in scholarships or fellowships, or just you go to a convention and you see familiar faces and they're there to support you.
Yeah, I mean, as you heard earlier, I am in the NHJ's Adelante Academy, the inaugural cohort, which is for people sort of mid-career looking to sharpen their leadership skills. And it just shows that this sort of community that you're building here, you can do that at many different stages in your career. I mean, I'm 34. I should probably not admit my age. No, I still feel 23. But
Try being 62.
but there are people, I mean, I've been doing journalism since I was 21. And there are people in my cohort who are in their late 40s, early 50s. And we're all there because we are seeking that sort of connection and that sort of building on each other's experiences. And it's invaluable. It really is something that can be a temp check for yourself too, to be like, hey, am I being unreasonable for feeling this way? And it just also shows that it's never too late to learn. Like, you're never too late to say, I'm a little bit lacking in this area. Something that I like to say a lot is that, doctors need to take board exams routinely to recertify themselves and be able to practice. There's no equivalent of that in journalism. You can literally put on blinders in journalism, go your entire career with what you learned your first day in a newsroom. It shouldn't be that way, because that is what has led to some egregious things that we have seen happen. It's what has led to much harm and mistrust in our industry. But if you're being proactive and seeking out these opportunities, you can be your own sort of board exam and making sure that you're staying up to date with the latest practices, because you never want to be that editor that's sitting there sort of being grumpy and saying, well, this is how we did it back in my day, when things have changed, and we should be responsive to the massive changes in the world, in the industry. I mean, I could go on and on about that, but all of that is to say, it's not just good for your soul, it's also just good for you to be a better practitioner in the space of journalism.
Anna, can you share a little bit of what you all have been doing in the Adelante Fellowship?
For sure. Yeah. So we just had our kickoff week at the end of January, and we just spent a very intensive week doing design thinking exercises and hearing from professors at Columbia Business School and Columbia School of Social Work, and just a whole bunch of different people who have vast experience in management and sort of moving projects along. And part of this fellowship requires you to come up with a project to either engage a new audience or launch a new product. My project centers around systematizing and operationalizing, sorry for the jargon.
The processes are important.
Yeah, a sustained practice of user research at the Marshall Project. Right now, we'll do the ad hoc survey, we'll do the ad hoc focus group, which is a term I cannot get on board with. So we're trying to move stuff away from jargon as well into community listening, community engagement, that sort of thing. And to build a practice where you can actually listen to audience needs and build a pipeline into how that informs product development and how we put together news and what actual news stories people find interesting or helpful or useful. The Marshall Project focuses on the criminal justice system, and that affects people at different parts of their life cycle, different in very different ways. I mean, you can be affected by the criminal justice system from incarceration all the way to just post-Roe, living in this post-Roe world, right? So how we cover all these subjects and how we make that information accessible to people is really important to understand.
Definitely. And I think one of the key things when you participate in a fellowship, you have this incredible couple of days and you're so excited, and then you go back to your newsrooms. And I'm sure that this program will have different ways for you also to stay connected. But the reality is that from a big cohort, you may not connect the same way with every single person. So right. Identify, some of those people and make sure that you stay connected. That can be, hey, start a LinkedIn message, a WhatsApp group, whatever that may be. Find a way to still, keep that connection alive. Yeah. The next point we wanted to raise is connect with mentors who can support and advise you in different ways. I remember I had a student ask me, but professor, how do you find a mentor? Like, do you just go down the street like, will you be my mentor? It sounds so official about being a mentor. And one of the things that some advice that I got years ago is building your own kind of board of directors, your own support group. And that can be made of many different people. It can be people who are in your industry, former supervisors, professors. It can be that friend that is always going to tell you the truth. When you're pursuing that opportunity that may sound amazing on paper, but may not be the best thing for that moment in your life. Parents are great. I think I love calling my dad for advice, but the reality is, and I'm sure all of us sometimes call our parents or aunts or grandparents, and they sometimes can't always offer us, that support or understanding in the same way that someone in the industry. And you can certainly include your parent in your board of directors. If not, they probably would get upset with me if I don't say that. But you do want to build that, whatever that may be, and it can evolve over time. You want to have that group of people that you can turn to in different moments of your life. Do you have particular mentors that come to mind?
I do. I think I made it sound very flip and easy when I said I turned down that deputy editor position. It was torture. It was awful. I cried and cried and cried trying to figure out what was right. And having that board of directors was essential. I had no less than 10 calls with different people asking if it was the right decision to turn it down or not. Some people I consider mentors, and I have literally just cold emailed them and been like, hey, can I pick your brain about this? A person like that who comes to mind is Amanda Zamora. I have no idea if she would even remember if you said, oh, Ana Méndez mentioned you. But I have had conversations with her that have been truly shaping of my career. Walt Bogdanich, who's a 3-time Pulitzer winner at the New York Times. We won a Gerald Loeb together. he has been nothing but an advocate of my career and is very sad that I'm no longer an investigative journalist. But he's someone who I routinely call and say, hey, does this sound reasonable? And he also advocates for me, right? If someone's writing about Panama at the Times and he gets gets wind of it, he'll be like, hey, why don't you message her? She'll know how to help you out. So yeah, there are quite a few people, I'd say. Krissa Thompson at the Washington Post. She's wonderful. I actually met her through a formal mentorship program, the IWMF Gwen Eiffel program for women of color and non-binary folks. That's an excellent thing to pursue also. Yeah, it's really wonderful when you start to build up your village. And yeah.
And I think key to that is, there's going to be people you contact sometimes out of the blue, but really try to cultivate those relationships, because if you just out of the blue are like, I haven't spoken to you in 10 years, I need advice, maybe they'll respond, but it is really good to cultivate in the sense of maybe, you send them a check-in email, every 6 months. You're like, hi, just wanted to say what I've been up to. So that it's not always you're asking for something, but you're actually cultivating those relationships over time. And you can certainly adapt your board of directors depending on where you are in your career.
Yeah, that's a great point. I don't just randomly cold
Oh, no, I wasn't meant that. Yeah, no, because I've done that too. I've done that too. I'm saying it more like, that's good too. And thank goodness there's so many great people in our industry that you connected so strongly in the beginning that they're always going to be there for you. But I definitely also encourage to cultivate those relationships. Absolutely. The last point we wanted to flag in terms of this category of support is surrounding yourself with people who lift you higher, and then don't forget to lift people along the way. And this is something that can happen inside and outside of the newsroom. As Rachel noted at the top of our conversation, is we're in a moment of a lot of transition in journalism. It's tough out there in a lot of newsrooms, and some people, and that can lead to certain environments that can be toxic, that can be negative. And the question to you is, how do you rise above that? How do you find those people in the newsroom that are lifting you higher and that you are lifting them higher as well? I don't mean that you don't engage with those people that may be negative, or maybe, because we all have ups and downs. But how do you not engage in that negativity? How do you not engage in that gossip? How do you stay above that and really try to identify those people in the newsroom that you want to get coffee with, that are your cheerleaders in different ways? And I think right now in that industry is so important. And for us that have been in it for years now, it goes up and down. And having a good attitude and really surrounding yourself with those people goes a long, long ways. And then once you're in that role or in that position, don't forget to bring other people with you. If a student writes to you, or one of your younger folks in your newsroom wants to get coffee, you just never know what that relationship can turn into, and it's just so, so important to do. Anything you want to add?
No, I completely co-sign all of that. Yeah, you want to be that person who brings everyone along.
Definitely. Our next point is be driven by your passion and growth opportunities. And we've touched upon this in different ways. And Anna alluded to this when you said that you were very in tune with knowing that opportunity wasn't right. And that's one of the key things in being a leader every step of the way, is being in tune with what you're feeling in that moment and the sense of direction. And really being in tune with what motivates you to go to work and how that can turn into growth opportunities. And I think there's different techniques to be in tune. I mean, some people love to meditate. I struggle with meditation. It's too quiet. I'm like, I need activity. But maybe it's, after work, maybe it's 5 minutes to just reflect on your day. What did I really enjoy about my day? What can I do better? What was it that got me excited to get up, to work every day? Maybe it's setting aside some time on a Sunday as you're getting, ready for your day. So the thing is, if you're not in tune with what that is, life is a blur. Before you know it, it's 5 years down the line and you're like, what am I doing? What is this job that I'm at? What is this opportunity that I'm at? And no one can be in tune with yourself as much as you can. So it's really identifying what that is for you. Maybe you like to run. Maybe it's catching up with a good friend that really has seen you in different phases of your career. But it's really important to kind of get a sense of that. And then once you are in tune with things you may want to adapt or adjust, how do then you turn that into growth opportunities, right? Because we always want to be growing forward. And that can be wanting to do a fellowship like the one that you're doing now. It might be applying to other job opportunities. It might be taking on a project. But definitely that knowing what motivates you is so important to kind of finding that sense of direction.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I went all in with investigative journalism. And to this day, when people ask me, like, what are you? What do you do? Like, I am an investigative reporter first, product person second. But I burnt myself out. I completely burnt myself out. And it took a lot for me to reach a point to say, you know what, this is not sustainable. And if I want to continue working in this industry, I need to not hate it. And I need to...
It's important.
Yeah. And I need to stay sharp. I mean, you can't be handling investigations that impact many people's lives or, you know, are making lofty claims of corruption or whatever it may be if you're not super sharp. And that's really, I think, part of it, just being very cognizant of where you are. And if what you need is a break and what you need is to maybe go be a barista for like 6 months until you gather your thoughts, or, you know, just run a surf shack in Costa Rica, then go for it. Yeah, it just, I mean, I say that a little bit tongue in cheek. It takes a lot of privilege to just leave and do that. I'm not suggesting you do it unless you are positioned to, but it really is one of those things that you need to really take stock of what you're doing, because you also just don't want to be a miserable person to be around, right? If you are deeply unhappy with what you're doing, you're probably not going to be the most pleasant, and you should just honor yourself and be happy for yourself, and then be happy for, you know, for the sake of others in your ecosystem.
Definitely. The next point is channeling your unique perspective and personal story in the work you do. And I think in my career, that's come up in different ways. When I was at San Español, I just covered, you know, news for a Spanish language audience, for a Latin American audience. And then when I went to the Post, it was now covering it for an American audience. And understanding how you can apply your story in small and different ways. It wasn't necessarily, I'm going to go to Latin America and do an assignment because that's a passion I have. It can be, you know, in many different ways. It can be the way that you want to work on a project, and maybe just taking someone for lunch because you're like, I want to share a little bit of my background in a ways that it could help in the coverage that we're doing in different ways. And it doesn't just have to be your cultural background or racial background. There's so many, this country's so diverse. It can be your educational experience. It can be the, you know, where you come. This country, you could be you're from the South versus the West Coast versus the East Coast, and really bringing that story to whatever you're doing in a powerful way. The next one, which we've touched on in different capacities, is your passions and interests will evolve as you advance in your career. Be open to new professional opportunities. And I think a lot of us enter into journalism and, you know, it becomes a part of our identity of, I am Melissa who does this. And the reality is that's great, but a job is a job, and you need to be your own person without that role and whatever comes with it. And one of the things that I had to learn that was exciting to me is you know, my path to digital journalism, from thinking I was going to do TV, was really finding out that I thought it was so liberating to tell stories in the digital space. Whereas on TV, you had 2 minutes to do a segment and then it was gone. But then from realizing that to turning it into an opportunity was a process to do that. And it may mean that your dream evolves. It's not that you're losing your dream in a way, but it's evolving and you're going to be applying it in different ways. And I think that happens too for individuals who end up using their journalism skill sets outside of a newsroom. you know, there's that saying when you go into the PR world or media, where it's like you're going to the dark side. And look, we want all of you to stay in journalism. We need you. But the reality is that things are going to evolve over time, and that is okay. And it's figuring out how you want to take those passions and those growth opportunities as you're evolving with it.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, oftentimes people ask me, well, how did you jump to product? I mean, there are reporters who will go their whole careers without even knowing what a product team is. And to me, the answer has always been, product is the thing that bridges the person with the information. Product is what makes the storytelling possible, right? And if I'm at a point where I feel like the entire world around me is falling apart, trust in media is at its lowest point we've ever seen, people are on TikTok more than they are on any other website or platform or app, what can I do to sort of address that? And it really is, if I want people to read my 8,000 word investigation, I need to figure out how to get that to them. And that's what product does for me, right? So if my passion is around fixing that puzzle piece, that is what's going to inform my pivot. And yeah, I mean, I can talk all day long about so many of my passions outside of journalism that do also inform kind of why I do what I do. But I think you covered that so well.
Thank you. And then the last point we wanted to cover is get the practical skills to pursue your passions. You know, if you're lucky to be, and I'm very lucky to be in a very supportive team, and we support individuals who want to explore or shadow other teams or work with other teams. But I think something that, especially if you're in a big newsroom, there's a lot of opportunity to do other things. But it's very key that if you want to pursue something, think about the skills that you're bringing in it too as well. If you want to fly drones to go cover a story in, I don't know where, do you know how to fly a drone? Do you know how to tell a story with a drone? Like, make sure that in every step of your career, as you're advancing in these opportunities and evolving, do you have the skill sets to back it up? If you want to help write, how are you improving your writing? If you want to be a photographer or shadow a photography team, how are you improving in those skill sets as well, hand in hand, as you're taking those opportunities? And I think that's really important in advocating for yourself in wanting you know, an opportunity, is understanding well, what are the specifics that you can bring to be able to do that, and how are you going to present that?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, if you're mildly interested in coding to work on a big data project, go for it. There are so many opportunities now to be able to do that and have your workplace pay for it as well. So something that I like to do, I am very lucky in that my manager is extraordinary. I really won the manager lottery, and just 2 weeks ago we sat down and we wrote out a list. What does professional development look like to you, and what classes would you like to take? And I was like, honestly, I'm so weak on visual design. Why don't I take a class on how to use Figma and how to design for news? And, you know, it's something that I've always sort of fumbled my way through in my career, just sketching up mock-ups and wireframes and stuff like that. But this time with my boss, I'm actually like making a plan to sharpen that skill. So it also makes a difference if you have a boss that can enable that and support it intentionally. But if not, at least keep a list for yourself and try finding those little opportunities to pursue that.
I mean, and there's so many resources right now,
right,
online that are completely free. And, you know, whether you have a supportive team or not, you really have to take it upon yourself to pursue those different challenges and opportunities for your self-development.
Yeah.
And with that, we wanted to open a Q&A because we've done enough talking on our end, and we want to hear from you all. Do you have questions on anything we discussed? Maybe something you want to share with the group that came to mind, that connected with you? And I know we have two folks who also wanted to share about their inspiring leaders. So we'll start with questions and then inspiring leaders. Yeah.
And please remember to introduce yourself.
Oh, yes.
Hi, Bradford Davis, Independent.
Hi, Bradford.
Thank you for doing this, first of all. I really appreciate it. It's a question for you, Anna. One of the things you mentioned early in the presentation was your something that you identified in yourself as a trait, as a real strength, was being able to meet any person and just show a natural sort of curiosity about their lives, which of course should be obvious. Anyone is an incredible trait for journalists to have, but I often find that traits like that are kind of like segmented as like softer skills rather than hard ones. You know, I rarely see that bulleted, for example, you know, in a job description. How did you translate that, or if you can just go more into depth about how you sort of made that into sort of like a bullet point about who you are and why, you know, you were fit to do a certain task?
That is such a great and thoughtful question. Thank you for that. I don't want to give you like a boilerplate answer because it really is an excellent question and extremely legitimate. Putting that on a resume is not easy. The one thing I can say is that my rambling and asking of questions does often lead to concrete things, right? Being able to sit in a room and just talk to a presidential candidate and have him say things on the record, that will eventually lead to something, be it a pitch, be it an actual published interview, be it a nugget for a wider investigation. And I think that perhaps the hard skill isn't in, you know, this led to 13 stories. The hard skill there is more being able to translate something nebulous into a concrete insight that can lead to something that's impactful and meaningful for editorial strategy. So just being able to say, you know, that in these conversations with X people, you have gained these concrete learnings, and that these concrete learnings can result in either a beat memo or, you know, a big investigation into something. Or, I mean, I'm hesitating to go into the user research space because it's so specific and so sort of aside from reporting, but there's a lot to say there. I think that is where you can really dig into how these soft skills matter. I think that I'm so sorry. I feel like I'm struggling to answer your question because it's just such a good one, but it really is about connecting the nebulous stuff with the concrete.
You have to connect the dots and some supervisors naturally see the connecting dots, but sometimes you need to help connect them and make sure that you're advocating for yourself and being very clear about what you want to do and what you have at your disposal to be able, and also to the benefit of the team, because it's not only about your own benefit, it's a win for them. So how will this skill that you're connecting the dots to resonate with your team and also turn into something, a win for them? Yeah.
Hey y'all, I'm Julian Sarapru. I'm a fellow at the Boston Globe. I find that, you know, being a leader at a time when your title is not being a leader often requires a lot of labor outside of your job description. You know, like you're gonna serve on a DEI committee, but you're not getting paid to do that. You're taking time out of your day, all that stuff. So like, how do you balance that, you know, taking those initiatives while going above and beyond at the same time?
Sure. It's such a good question. It's something that I grapple with every day. I think it's one of those things where you really have to sort of do a cost-benefit analysis for yourself and also make a list for yourself of where you decide where you're going to push for more and where you're going to hold off. It's like and that in itself is labor, right? As in the Adelante Academy, we had a design thinking session with this amazing woman who's the leader of a center at Barnard for women, and she was saying, you know, being a person of color oftentimes requires double designing. You're not just designing the thing, you're designing how you are handling all of the garbage that falls on you for designing the thing. And I was like, wow, finally somebody has articulated what I've been struggling to articulate my whole life, right? And it's, gosh, you guys are asking such good questions. It's one of the, so for instance, I was on something that was called Ink for All at the Enquirer, and it came about after the Enquirer published a massively racist headline that was Buildings Matter Too, after George Floyd was murdered, right? And it was horrible, and this DI committee was created, Ink for All, and there were so many different parts to it. It was like source tracking and a gut check channel, and how are we changing practices internally, and all of these sorts of things. And I, in that moment, felt like I first had to go all in. And eventually, as time went on and things started taking shape and I agreed or disagreed with the strategy and direction of certain things, I started taking things back. And I had a boss who, thankfully, once I brought this up to her, she was like, you know what? We can make some of this stuff part of like your actual job. Some of this participation will actually be considered part of your job, and then you can release some of the stuff that maybe you've outgrown in your role. So I no longer had to deal with tasks that really were not as important anymore, so that I could use my actual work hours to do that. So I was technically paid for that labor. I think that in spaces where you feel comfortable, you can ask for more money, you can ask for a bonus, you can ask, I mean, there are different ways to think of compensating labor, right? You can be like, you pay for a class for me, or you pay for me to go to this conference or this event. But it really has to be a cost-benefit analysis, and even for your mental health, right? Like, some of this stuff ends up taking just like a horrible mental toll that you can't even quantify in money. So again, a very imperfect answer to an excellent question.
I don't have much to add to that. I think that, look, time is precious.
Right.
Your time is precious. It's that simple. There's only so many hours in the day. There's different seasons in life where you could do 20,000 things at once. And there's going to be other seasons in your life that you're just not going to have that same luxury. Right. So what I would say, if you're in a season in your life that you have more of a luxury of time, and you need to identify your priorities, and you know, where are you headed, and how are these opportunities going to help you go in that direction? If you want to be a leader, being a leader can be many things. It doesn't have to be being a manager and overseeing people. You can lead projects, you can lead initiatives. And I think that's something that is key in realizing and being a leader in every stage, is that leadership looks differently in different places. So if you're doing all these things because you want that one role and that one title, and then it doesn't happen, you're going to become bitter about that situation. So don't worry, that role, yes, keep an eye on it, but focus on what you're enjoying about these experiences. Be strategic in the ones that you are putting and pouring into, and those may or may not turn into other opportunities. But I agree with Anna. You just have to be strategic in your time. And it may be that a year doing this, you realize that what you were putting in maybe wasn't worth it anymore. You need to move on to other things. And you know, some things may not end up paying, but you may get real enjoyment of it. And you never know down the line if those can help you, you know, with different connection points. And if you should feel like you should be getting paid for something, it's definitely important to speak up about it.
Yeah. And I would, I'm so sorry.
Go ahead.
I would just say that oftentimes being a leader is also, I say this understanding that it's not this simple, but it can be as simple as saying no. And not just saying no to being on a DEI committee, but as simple as saying, no, I will not be pursuing this line of reporting if you think it's harmful. If you think that you parachuting into a neighborhood, into, let's say, Brockton, and all of a sudden, because you're not from Brockton and they might not trust you, saying no is a very powerful tool you have at your disposal, and that is leading. It's Yeah, I could go on.
It's saying no to say a yes to something else, and setting up some of those guidelines, and also to a person you trust, whether it's your supervisor or not, explaining why you're setting those guidelines. You know, maybe it's that you want to focus on something else versus this.
They have just broken off two of the most powerful pearls of wisdom that I have heard in my 40-year career. Learning how to say no strategically. And saying no is saying yes to something else.
100%.
It took me so long in my career to learn that. We can take maybe a couple more questions because I know you have to head out.
I know, but we have time.
Okay.
5:30.
A couple more.
Can I go for it, or?
We'll come up front next.
Okay. I think my question.
Introduce yourself.
Oh, my name is Aditi. I work for CNN with Melly. One of my, I guess this is more of a process question than a hurdle question. Sometimes I find myself in more of a brainstorm stage where I don't necessarily have, I really want to do this thing. I have ideas and I'd like to, discuss with my boss or whatever, but, obviously, sometimes when you're trying to take ownership of a project, you also want buy-in from your managers, your senior leadership, whatever. So how do you go about brainstorming what works for both sides without essentially confusing your boss or having them think that you're confused?
That's a good question. Do you want to? You can. I mean, here's what I would say: is brainstorming is great, but you need to make sure that when you are coming to your team with something that you want to bring to life, you want to have it at least refined as much as possible, because there's only so much that your manager can do, and it's important for you to specify that. So in crafting those conversations, this is an idea I have that's still green. I would love help in doing X, Y, and Z and help me take this to this. That, number one, reduces confusion, because that way your manager knows where this is in the process. And then if it's something that's more refined, you can say this is what I'm picturing for this pitch that will work. This is what I need from you, any support that you can give. I think many times we think managers are mind readers. And hey, sometimes really good managers can maybe read your mind, but many cannot. And I really appreciate when people that I manage will just tell me, what do I need? And sometimes it is, and every relationship with your leadership is different, but you may have a relationship where you can be brainstorming this and this, but you do want to make sure that when you're bringing something to your team, you at least have a sense of direction. If you don't, be clear about that so they kind of know where it is in the process.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, it's an interesting question to answer from the product perspective because half my job is brainstorming. So if you want to brainstorm a lot, head over to product. But no, I think that what you just said really is the most important thing. Just articulating where you are and saying, this is where I am and this is the help that I need. And sometimes being able to say what it is that you need is the hardest part, because you might not even know what you need at that point. And even saying that can help you, right? Yeah. Saying, I'm not sure what help I need right now. I just want you to know that this is happening. One of a joke that I had with my last boss at the Inquirer was that I was the editor-in-chief of starting blank Google Docs, because I would show up to a meeting with a blank Google Doc and be like, okay, we need to fill this out together. But, it was a joke, but really what was at the heart of it was that I needed someone to bounce ideas off of with me, and someone who would help me refine and shape what it is that I wanted to get done in that moment. And of course, I had an editorial role within a product team, so I was able to kind of meander a little bit more than your typical editorial role, but I think that that holds true for any editorial role, right? Like just being able to say, I just need you to help bounce ideas off of me or with me, and let's work on refining these together. Like that just goes along.
Yeah, and it might just be that person, your manager, can point you in the direction of someone else, and I think that can be as helpful.
Right.
Hi, I'm Bianca Gilandan. I'm with Politico. Thanks for being here. So I really identified with the whole sprint comment because
yes, we've been in a sprint for a while.
Yeah, but I'm also sitting here thinking like my sprint was towards getting a job, and now I don't know how to craft those next steps of like, I know I'm very good at my job, I know I'm respected in my job, but how do you create a vision for your career, and how have you all thought about like becoming an editor or becoming a project manager? What steps of thinking did you go through?
You've come to the right place.
Yes, that's what I was going to say. I struggled with that because I knew I wanted to be a journalist very young. I was 14 years old, knew that what I wanted to do, and I kind of knew the steps to get there. And when I finished grad school, I was like, oh my goodness, now it's just open sea. What comes next? And we go through these steps that are so structured for us, and then we enter into the professional world, and that structure is gone, right? And I think what Rachel was alluding to is, I think it's many things. It's fellowships like this that help you see things differently. It's being in tune, which we talked about, with where you're headed and what that looks like for you. And it's giving yourself a little bit of grace. You need to understand that, and I'm sure most of you in this room are very ambitious, very driven, and we need to kind of recalibrate a little bit. You need to take a breath. Everyone take a deep breath. You need to take a deep breath and know, I needed that breath because I have a big night coming up. But you need to realize that the sprint that you've been on has almost morphed a little bit, some of your expectations, that you need everything now. And it's kind of recalibrating a little bit, and also sitting and brainstorming for your own life. Just like you're brainstorming for a project, you need to brainstorm for your own life. What are the next steps that I want to do? What does that look like? Who are the people that can help me get there? And being open to whatever that may look like, and know that it is okay that you don't have it all figured out. Everyone acts like they have it all figured out. No one has it figured out. We're all on a journey together. And I think one of the things that I would add to the trying to figure things out is, we're constantly bombarded by what other people are doing. And I remember hearing this piece of advice years ago that really stuck with me is, comparison is a thief of joy. The more you're comparing your journey to other people and where people are going, you're going to lose track of where you're headed in your own way. So that was a very long-winded question to say that there isn't a clear answer, but it's okay to not have it figured out in this moment, but make sure you're positioning yourself to be able to get those answers along the way.
Yeah. I mean, my husband often makes fun of me because he's like, you had it so much more together in your 20s than you do in your 30s. And that's because I think that now I'm so much more open to just the journey, where I was, the investigative journalist, went to grad school, got the job, had a job offer from the New York Times, turned it down, but worked on investigative projects with them on a freelance basis, won a Gerald Loeb Award by age 27. I was like, check, everything that you dream of on paper, I was checking, and all of a sudden I was like, I'm dizzy. And it was terrible, and I was so unhappy. I was happy, but very unhappy too. I didn't have a life. And I just had to hit pause and say, I'm just gonna let things happen as they do. And I just need to be very clear on my guiding principle. And I think that as long as you have a clear north and a clear guiding principle, everything around that will just fall into place. And it's knowing that, how did you get here? You all probably took different routes to get here, but you got here, right? You're all in the same room with us, but we all probably walked down different streets. And it really comes down to that. Like for me, I am obsessed. It is truly what drives me every single day. I need people to have information be accessible to them and for people to understand what it is that they're consuming. And for all of that process to cause minimal to no harm. Like, that is my guiding light. I can do that by reporting, I can do that by writing up my reporting, or I can do that by working on a product team that gathers a bunch of user research and then creates products to make that accessible to people. So I think that defining that guiding light for yourself, that north, like what it is that motivates you, will help you define how you eventually get there, because you can get there by being a reporter, you can get there by working at CNN Digital, you can get there in so many different ways.
Good evening. I'm Kayla Sharp. I'm the Deputy Team Lead for Bloomberg Government's newsletters, policy newsletters. So one of the things that I've noticed in journalism, especially in DC journalism, that it's a very close-knit ecosystem. Everyone knows everyone. You have friends and colleagues in multiple newsrooms, and there have been multiple instances where I've sat down at coffee and talked to a friend or colleague about what they love about the newsroom, what they don't like about the newsroom, or somebody's reached out to me and said, hey, I'm applying for a job here, and I noticed it used to be there. What made you maybe want to leave? And what are the red flags that you saw? And I find it so beneficial to have the trust in my colleagues to be able to share with them my experiences and have them trust me so I can make informed decisions about my future roles. Mm-hmm. So Melissa, I noticed that you had started at CNN and then you went to the Post, mm-hmm. and then you decided to come back to CNN. And Anna, you've mentioned turning down a role with the Post but still maintaining that relationship to freelance with them. So I was wondering if you guys could talk a little bit about how you go about navigating those relationships with newsrooms so that you have the door still open to return to them, while at the same time, like, using your resources and your board of directors to do that research and ask those questions so you can make decisions about where may or may not be like a good or healthy place to continue your career.
Sure, I'll give it a stab. I think that at the end of the day, what you touched on is really at the heart of it, right? It's the relationships you build. Mm-hmm. And I think that people know when you're trying to have a relationship for the sake of having a relationship, yes. and when you're having a relationship because it's authentic, mm-hmm. and it's meaningful, and you know, it's a mutual thing of trust and respect. And I can't say that I attribute much else to my ability to say to the Times, thank you so much, but no thanks right now. I do still want to continue working with you in some capacity. I think also being able to sort of show the value that I could add to them was helpful in that moment. But it really comes down to authentic relationship building, being respectful, and not just, you know, saying, oh, no, I'm good, thank you, but actually having a concerted conversation that outlines the reasons why. Having said that, you will never owe any organization an explanation for anything, right? No is a full sentence. But if you are interested in, you know, maintaining long-term relationships, there are ways where you, oops, sorry. Oh, I thought that was me, that might have been yours. But having said that, there are ways where you can, you know, sort of have respectful conversations that leave things on very good terms and continue to show the value that you can add in different capacities at a later date when the time is right.
Yeah, 100% agree. I think that relationships are key. I met a lot of, or maintained those relationships and kept them through NHJ and through other organizations that I was in, and it was intentional in keeping those. And I think, you know, I've been fortunate. I've had good experiences and wanted to leave those doors open. That's not always the case, but even in those moments, it's always good to leave doors open. And I think I've found that it's always been celebrated. It's bittersweet when you go to somewhere else, but if your quality of work and who that stamp that you left in your newsroom speaks for itself in many times, right? So it's important to build those relationships, leave those doors open. But a lot of times opportunities have come back to me, weren't even ones that I was searching for. They came to me. And it's a testament to those relationships that you have been building. Sometimes you don't even know opportunities that may come into fruition in the future. So I don't know, did that answer your question?
Yes.
Maybe, yeah.
And I mean, this industry is this big, right? So hiring manager I had said no to at the Times eventually became the the managing editor of opinion at the Inquirer, and I was already working at the Inquirer, and we were like, oh hey, here we are, the two of us working at the same news organization after all, and you know, we would have chats, and it was excellent. It was like, oh my gosh, of course, like this is wonderful to be here together now.
And
so.
you know, and expressing gratitude and humility, even when you don't take an opportunity, you may be reached out and you can't leave your current role.
Right.
But it's just expressing thank you. It means so much we reached out. I would love to keep this conversation going. There's many ways you can leave the door open. Yeah. So I think this may be the last question.
Last question.
Last question.
Hi, my name's Meher. I'm the democracy reporter at Carolina Public Press. So I think you both kind of touched on this, and Bianca asked a similar question to what I had in mind as well. But you said that it's easy to get lost and lose track of your journey. What if you feel like you've been kind of working towards a certain destination in mind and going about it in a very roundabout sort of way? And you also said not to compare yourself to others, and sometimes it can be hard when you see it happening quicker for others, and your journey is kind of still ongoing. Mm-hmm. How do you stay motivated, and how do you continue to like rechart a new path towards that same destination?
Yeah. I think it doesn't happen overnight. It's a constant reminder that, you know, Anna touched on it, like your guiding principle. It's you constantly have to recenter yourself. When you feel like you're getting distracted over here, distracted over there, you need to recenter yourself on where you're headed and know that your journey is unique. I think that, you know, seeing other people's journey, use it to fuel you forward rather than taking your joy away. And I think that can be a powerful thing as well. But sometimes, you know, opportunities feel very natural, and sometimes they feel like a lot of work. And there's not a good or bad reason for that, but I think that if it is happening slower for you, it may mean that you need to pursue other opportunities or look in other directions. Sometimes when that slowness happens, but what's in your control, you can't control everything, right? But you can control your attitude, you can control your motivation and recentering in that moment. And, you know, the board of directors comes into play and trying to get advice from other people of, you know, is there something that I'm overlooking, opportunity that I'm missing out on, or something that I could be, you know, a training opportunity that I could be pursuing as well. But it is a balance game. It's not like you're going to be like, you know, I am recentered today and I will never feel like this again. No, you know, it ebbs and flows. And I think that is okay. We're human beings. Give yourself some grace when you have those moments. But the question is, what are you going to do with what you're feeling? Are you going to use it to fuel you, or are you going to use it to really put you down?
I have no idea how these two women did this, but they have literally captured every element of the next 2.5 days of the conversations that we're going to be having. They've talked about authenticity. They've talked about being strategic. They've talked about your identity and how that comes into play. I am so impressed and grateful to Anna and Melissa for joining us today to launch the 2024 Widening the Pipeline Fellowship Program. And I'd like us to take this opportunity to show them how grateful we are.
Can I respond really quickly? May I respond really quickly?
Oh, yes, you may. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, please
Go
don't
ahead.
worry. No,
Go
I
ahead.
just want to add something. You have all lived through an event that rocked us to our core, the pandemic. We're now living through another event of unprecedented death in Gaza. You will never know what awaits on the other side in this career, in this industry. That is why it matters so much that you keep your center. We would have never known how many newsrooms would have gone remote, fully remote, to work the way that we do to decentralize the stations and the nuclei of power. You need to stay true to why you're in this business. Is it because you want to be on TV? That's valid, but know that that's why you're here. If it's because you want to tell stories through your very specific, authentic, representative voice, do that. But just don't lose your north. We have no clue what's going to happen with the way the world is headed right now. We have been on the brink of World War III many a time in the last few years. I mean, seriously, it's unprecedented times, and we have become immune to that term, but it's real. And if you're not, you know, just very, very aware of why you are here, everything
you need
else.
to have a strong foundation, 100%.
Yeah.
Once again, look at your schedule. Boris Sanchez joins us on Thursday, and the title of his discussion is Finding Your Why
I love
in
that.
Journalism.
Absolutely.
So basically, you can all go home now.
No, it's all going to build.
Everything.
It's all going to build. Yeah,
So-
I was just going to say, these are Anna and I's personal emails. So if you all have questions or want to connect with us, you can certainly connect with us on LinkedIn as well, but these are our emails, so feel free to connect.
Once
but it's
again.
been wonderful. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Cheers to you.